Okay. So today we're going to talk about the truth about downsizing. So if you think you need to pull out a box, that's not what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about putting our head in the game, getting our correct mindset. And I'm so excited about this talk because it's something that we can do at any stage, preparing, thinking about it, making plans. Nobody likes to have to rush through something. So I'm very, very excited to welcome Shannon. Shannon is our panel, or our moderator, today. So Shannon has been in real estate for 10 years. She is a blessing to me. I get to work with her every day. How many of you guys have gotten to work with Shannon in the past? Yep. She is phenomenal. She is a blessing, and she has a background in HR. She has a background in her customer experience is out of this world. So Shannon is a certified senior housing professional as well as a certified downsizing coach. She's going to be moderating and introducing our panelists.
Okay.
Thanks, Shannon.
Well, so we've got a lot of change, right? Well, I'm not changing, so I'm still here. So that's a good thing, at least for today. So that's good. You can only take one change at a time. And today we've done two, so we can check that off for today and tomorrow. So guys, when they invited me to be the moderator today, I thought, well, so, I can do HR and I can sell just about anything, houses, I've sold jewelry, I've sold toilet paper and everything in between. I thought, I'm not exactly sure why they're picking me to come up here and be the moderator for the psychology part. Then I figured out why. It's because they're giving me this panel that they need me to be able to, we'll say corral. Because two of them are psychologists, they're both PhDs in psychology, and they're both women that I incredibly admire, but can also say, hey, and not be too afraid to tell them that when they need to come back in. So I think that's probably why. And because they're some of my favorite people. We just finished Mother's Day. We've got lots of mothers in the group. We all had pretty good days, huh? I hope everybody had a good Mother's Day. It's a time for reflection for me because it is always so humbling to me how many women have been influential in my life, and even looking around this room, how many women have been influential. But the two of these panelists, I've just been very blessed to have in my life. One, my whole life, she's my mom. And then the second is Nikki Bucklew, who has been in my life, well, for the 10 years that I've been in real estate. She's the woman who I met in a copy room one day, and she's telling me about this senior program, and I said, really? I said, I've been looking for this book for 10 years since my grandparents passed away on how you do this. And she said, oh, well, here's the book. And then I became part of her group and learned her programs and thought, well, if I'd have known this when my grandparents went through it, what a much simpler process it would have been for me and my family and for my grandparents. So today we are talking about the truth and about downsizing part one. So you notice that this downsizing topic is so large that we've had to break it into 3 months. So this is the summer of downsizing, okay? So you have May, which is this topic, the psychology of letting go. You have June, which is the simplifying the moving process. And then in July, we're going to be talking about dealing with all the extra stuff. How many of us have extra stuff? How many of us have extra stuff? Yeah, it's not hard to have extra stuff. Now, I can tell you, I know several of you in this room who we have helped with your downsizing process, so I know you don't have a lot of stuff anymore, and you've done a good job. So before I bring the panel up, there's one thing I want to kind of clarify. Often, there's two terms that are thrown around a lot, and we're going to use them very specifically today, so I want to make sure everyone's kind of on an even playing field when we talk about these terms. First is downsizing. Downsizing and decluttering often get intermixed, but they're two very different terms. And so downsizing is when somebody is actually changing from a larger location to a smaller location, okay? That can be from a larger house to a smaller house. It can be from a larger apartment to a smaller apartment. All of this is considered downsizing. That's the actual act of changing locations and downsizing. Decluttering is what we should do every spring, fall, and probably in the winter and summer too. That is when you clean out the junk drawer and you get rid of the trash and you get rid of the 15 extra Sonic cups that you have kept because you're positive you may need it again later on. Those are the things, that's decluttering. That's when you're cleaning things up and you may have some things that just need to go in the garbage, or you're just reorganizing because you're positive you can fit some more things in that linen closet, that you have enough towels for you and 3 neighbors, okay? So that's decluttering. So that's the distinction. So today our focus is going to be about downsizing. It's not as hard to convince people to declutter because it's not as threatening. It just makes us feel good. Downsizing sometimes can be pretty intimidating and overwhelming. I've been talking to my clients all this last week, actually last 2 weeks, about downsizing. I talk to them all the time, but I started asking questions for this. Know that if you're a client and I'm getting ready to be a moderator, you're probably gonna get your brain picked about certain things. And one of the things that hit me is that we've probably all downsized in this room at one point or another in our lives, but it was at different stages in our life, and we didn't count it as downsizing, we just counted it as moving. So if you think about your life, I downsized for the first time when I was 17 years old, and I moved from the house that I was raised in my entire life to a 1-bedroom apartment for the interim before I moved to OU, which was less than a 1-bedroom apartment in the dorms. That was my first downsizing experience. And then I thought about my life going forward, and I'm just gonna tell you, I have downsized 3 different times in my life. Now I've upsized 5, but I've downsized 3, and I never thought about it that way. So I'm wanting you to kind of begin to think about downsizing, not as that intimidating thing that you're dreading, but looking, hopefully, thinking about the psychology of it as something as a new chapter. So I'm gonna invite these 3 wonderful ladies to come up. We have, I get to play with the clicker, and I can tell you that I am not much better than Becky. Okay, so we have our 3 panelists today. Our first panelist is Nikki Buckaloo. We all know Nikki. She is the founder of the Senior Living Truth Series, and also she also is the founder of the Senior Real Estate Institute. And then you have Catherine Warren, who is a professional organizer, and she is the owner of Be Organized. Thank you very much. And then you have Diane Bauer, who is a retired she's PhD, a retired clinical psychologist. And if you have been to any of our panels in the last couple of years, you have heard a little bit about her journey in retirement. So on the thing, I love Danielle, because Danielle always puts positive spin on things. Do we know that about Danielle, right? So underneath it, it says happily retired. And it made me laugh because I'm not positive we're all the way to happily, but you can say it without her threatening you to say, don't call me retired. So I figure that's an improvement. That's an improvement, right? Okay, so welcome, ladies. How's it going?
Good.
Good? Okay, so we're gonna just jump right into it. Nikki, I'm gonna have you start. Tell us a little bit about yourself. We kind of know you, but tell us how you're an expert in downsizing, how you interact with downsizers.
So I'll share the short version because Shannon knows it's a long story, but I started helping people downsize out of their home as a real estate agent when I was about 27 years old, Chris and I, and we realized that there were a lot of our clients that were moving into retirement communities. They had homes that they had lived in on many times 20, 30, 40, 50, even 60 years. And that was a different client than a typical client. And what we realized is that there was sometimes a bigger need for assistance. And Chris laughs because I'd move people in my Ford Explorer from their house to wherever they were moving. And finally, I had a friend who said, Nikki, you can't do that anymore. I said, why? She said, well, first of all, there's a liability involved in that. And second of all, you just can't do that for everybody. So we started a move management company. And so we started a professional organization that did that. And then we got good enough at it that real estate agents around the country started asking us how they could do it. So we started a company that's called the Seniors Real Estate Institute, where we train real estate agents all over the country to do that. So that's kind of our journey, and we've done it twice now, and now we primarily, Chris and I, focus on training real estate agents all around the country on downsizing, and we do less of it hands-on and more of the coaching and training of people who do it hands-on.
Big visionary, your specialty.
Yeah, my knees don't let me do the work as much anymore. I have to have help with that.
I was not going to call that out for you. Okay, so Catherine.
That's why we have great people like Catherine.
That's absolutely. Catherine, introduce yourself.
Hello, good morning. So I'm Catherine. I am the owner of Be Organized. Because I don't have a loud booming voice, so I do need this microphone. And I'm gonna need people to wave me in the back if you cannot hear my voice. So I'm Catherine. I am the owner of Be Organized, and I have led that organization for over 6 years now. I am actually a lifelong resident of Oklahoma City. I grew up here, and I still live here with my husband and our 10-year-old daughter. So I lead a team of organizers. I don't do as much of the physical work anymore because I do spend a lot of time running the company, but I love that I still get the opportunity to interact with almost every client that we work with, both at the beginning of the process and at the end of the process. And of course, I stay up to date on everything that we are doing with that client. As organizers, we specialize in creating customized and sustainable home organizing solutions, but so interestingly enough, a lot of home organizers have discovered along the way that we're really good at move management. A lot of what is involved in that process were tasks that we were already helping clients with. And so my team and I also specialize in managing the details of moving and life transitions, from downsizing and packing to space planning and settling into a new home. We offer hands-on support every step of the way. We also help clients curate and preserve their family legacy through physical and digital photo organization. My team and I, we are very passionate about helping our clients feel more at home in their space and confident in the next chapter of their life.
That is a big task. And from her Ford Explorer to yours, I mean, that's a big
To my CRV.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Now, I'll just also tell you, sometimes I'll be good and say Diane, and sometimes you'll hear Mom. Just know it's energy. So Diane, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Diane Bauer. My background for the last 40 years has been that as a clinical psychologist. I was kind of propelled into retirement a few years ago. And no, I didn't go gracefully. And I'm getting more graceful about it. And doing this today made me rethink about my life and rethink about this process. And I'm looking forward to sharing that today with the group.
Now, your career, you've helped seniors throughout in different aspects. So tell us a little, just briefly about that.
About 25 years ago, part of what I started doing was treating seniors that were in skilled units. And that kind of morphed into seniors that were in care centers too. And actually, it was a very good job, great company. I worked there a week and I wanted to quit. I was 50, not 75. And it looked too real to me. At 50, you can still kind of fool yourself that you're not going to get old. And all of a sudden, my denial system quickly started getting challenged. I had patients that were actually younger than me in the nursing home. And I realized my wanting to quit so badly was about me, not about the job. I actually loved the job. And I stayed 25 years. And I am so grateful that I did. Those years, I learned the most I've ever learned as a psychologist.
Let me just say, I hadn't thought about that, Diane, until you brought it up. And early in my career as a counselor, I worked in nursing communities. And that was actually when Chris and I decided to specialize, is because I had one lady that I counseled who had such a terrible experience with her relocation. I came home to Chris crying and I said, that should not have to be that way and we can help. It was interesting. So that's interesting that our stories parallel there.
Yeah, I told you I'm the one that gets to be up here and know that that's kind of weird inner thread. So anyway, Okay, so Diane, I'm going to have you start with the first question. What emotional hurdles do you often see when working with clients who are thinking about downsizing?
As I thought about my life, I've actually downsized twice for completely different reasons, but I realized the process of it was the same, absolutely the same. And what you will find when you even slightly mention that word in your environment is you're going to start hearing all kinds of noise from your brother-in-law, from your sister, from your children, from your neighbor. Some will be positive, some will be absolutely terrified that you're even thinking about doing this. You will hear all kinds of noise. That's normal, and it's going to happen. If you can kind of put a little damper on that noise, there's 3 steps you have to do, and they're real simple. They're really simple. The first one, nobody makes that decision but you. You have to make that decision. Not your neighbor, not your brother-in-law, not your sister, not your uncle. It's your decision. So how did I make that decision? I made it based on necessity. My first downsize, I was in my 40s and it was 1980s. I had one daughter that left that summer for college. I had another daughter that summer that decided she wanted to live with her dad. All of a sudden, my responsibilities went out the door. Well, not completely, but it freed me up. And I wanted something I could not get in Oklahoma. I wanted it really badly. The only place I could get it was California. That was the reason I moved. I needed something I couldn't get where I was at, and I had a goal of where I wanted to go. Those are the 3 things you have to do in this process. Look at why is this thought crossing your mind? Why are you here today? What's prompting you to be here today? So I listed what was prompting me that I had to change. I needed a PhD, and they did not have the program in Oklahoma, period. I had to compromise what I got, or I needed to move. And I decided moving was it. Now, in 1980, in the 80s, I don't believe anybody was using the term downsizing.
Yeah.
They called me crazy. They told me I was making a really bad decision. I was a poor woman.
Well, you moved to California. I mean, come on.
Correct.
Yeah, that is part.
And moving to California, I was poor, so packing up all of my stuff and paying $6,000 to have it hauled to California, and it was 20 years old, was just simply not financially feasible to me. And I didn't know how to get rid of all this stuff. I'd had lots of garage sales, and I knew that wasn't going to cut
come
it.
back to that one. Let's come back to that one. Okay. So we've got the hurdles have been other people. That was a big
The
big hurdle.
noise.
Big
The
noise.
noise
The
you're
noise
gonna
all
hear.
around it. Okay. So Catherine, what are some of the hurdles that you hear from your clients that are downsizing, and how do they overcome those hurdles?
So oftentimes by the time we start working with a client, they have made the decision to downsize. I love hearing from Diane and Nikki because they have more experience helping people get to that place. But usually by the time we get to downsizing with clients, the decision has been made, whether they're happy about it or not. Oftentimes it's the latter. And the clients, while they know this is something that they have to do and they have committed to the process, that doesn't mean that they're happy about it. They usually feel overwhelmed. They feel like they're maybe not completely in control of the process. And Diane, I loved your comment about the noise, because oftentimes it's the noise and other people's opinions coming into the conversation that make the clients feel like they are no longer in control of the process. And there can also be a sense of loss there too. The finality of when I'm parting with these things, I'm no longer hosting the big family Christmases. You know, when I'm hanging on to the Christmas china, I could still do that, even though realistically that's probably no longer going to happen. But, you know, there's some loss, there's some finality there. And so one thing we love to try and help our clients do, coaching them through that process, is to gain back some of that sense of control. And, you know, how can they be more in control of the process? How can the decisions feel like their own? One thing at Be Organized that at least comes into play internally, if not always externally with the client, is we have 7 client organizing profiles that company-wide we have developed over, you know, a decade or more of working with thousands and thousands of clients. And there are 7 of them, and we're not gonna discuss them today.
You mean not everybody's the same?
Not everybody's the same.
Well, so really, you guys are narrowing this down lovely. So you've got noise, and then you have loss of control. Because, guys, we have a lot of noise in our life, and it's kind of scary when you lose control, correct? Okay, so Nikki, so what other hurdles? Is there anything else that, I mean, there's lots of hurdles.
I have 25.
Okay, you get to use one.
Okay.
Okay, one.
No, I really don't have 25, but I'll go fast. The fear of the unknown is the one I see. Fear of the unknown. Am I going to like it there? Am I going to fit in? Is it going to be what I think it is? Those kind of fear of the unknown.
It really kind of becomes back to when you went to 9th grade or your first day in high school. Who are you going to sit with at lunch?
Yeah, and it really depends on how much change that person has experienced in their life. Like, I changed schools regularly when I was young. So for me, I walk into a room and I go, hey, who am I going to meet in this room? But if you've lived in the same place for 50 or 60 years, and then you're being, you know, relocating into another entirely different world or environment, that's a real fear, I think. And then I'll just name these. We don't have to go into detail because they're going to come up later. But guilt. There's some people that have guilt. For various reasons. Some people have denial, like Diane mentioned. Some people overestimate their capabilities. And then I wrote this one down, and I will say that, you know, the psychological hurdle that a lot of people have when it comes to moving into a place that offers supportive services, like a retirement community of some sort, is they have this fear of life, the end of life. Like, when is their life going to end? I did a focus group, Shannon, a few years back with Concordia, and there was a gentleman in the room who is fantastic, and I won't be able to get his name right, but Claude. It was Claude. Claude has been there forever, and he was sitting in the room when I stood up at the flip chart, and I said, people move to Concordia because...
And fill in the blank.
Fill in the blank. And Claude, I waited, and people named things or whatever and all that. And Claude had been living there a while, and he said, people move to Concordia to die. And now you have to know Claude's an active gentleman, very active. And I said, now, Claude, I can't sell that.
Well, it'd be kind of a scary poster.
It would be it's not a Concordia marketing piece, but to this day. But it was, I said, Claude, I can't sell that. And here's what Claude said that was very impactful to me is he said, Nikki, he said, if we don't think about that, if we don't know that that's what is in the back of someone's mind, then we are missing the boat, because that is in their mind, whether we want it to be or not, is people are moving here because they know at some point they will reach the end of their life, and they want to live the best life possible from now until then. And I went, Claude, I can sell that.
That's right.
So, you know, that's really, I think, from a psychological standpoint, nobody wants to talk about the end of their life and what that looks like, but we have to.
And that's part of the journey. And you can stay where you're at, or you can downsize and enjoy different parts of the journey. That's a choice.
It is a choice.
Yeah, it's about a choice. And really what this is about today is about learning what choices are out there and about planning and educating. So our goal is not to tell you when the best time is. So Nikki, this is my next question to you, because is there a best time to downsize, or is there a better time than others to downsize?
Well, to Catherine's point, you know, if I could wave a magic wand and know exactly when I was going to need something smaller or a different environment, that would be fantastic. But I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm assuming y'all don't either.
I do not.
No, we need to get one.
But so hold on.
I would love one.
You've downsized in your life, haven't you?
I have. We've downsized a couple times. No.
It wasn't a bad word at
No.
different points in your life.
Right. But when you're thinking about it from a stage of life where I don't know how many times in real estate, Shannon, we hear people say, this is my forever home. I'm going to buy or build my forever home. And when I did my dissertation, it was hilarious. There was a guy that lived at Epworth Villa. He and his wife had moved there recently. And he said, we're on our fourth forever home. He said, I had a forever home. She had a forever home. We had a forever home together. And now we're here. And this is our final forever home. And I was there to do research, not coach. If I'd have been there to coach, I'd have said, you're wrong. I wouldn't have said you're wrong, but I'd have got him to believe, because here's the deal. He was in an independent living apartment that was 2,000 square feet. Eventually he'll go to assisted living, and then he'll probably end up in long-term care, and because of his health. And I wanted to say, no, you have 2 more forever homes to go. But in fairness, he was right. He had made the final choice of a community he could move through the stages like Concordia. And that, to me, was the forever home choice. Yeah.
So what you're saying is that downsizing is not a final decision. It's a tool, and it's a muscle that you have to rebuild if you've lived somewhere a long time.
It's a next decision.
It's a next decision. It's a continuation. Okay. So Catherine, tell us, is there a best time that you've experienced with your clients to downsize, or a better time, or is this just a myth?
I mean, I don't know that I have a lot to add to what Nikki has already said, because I think it is
tough to follow.
She is tough to follow. I don't know that there is necessarily a best time to downsize. This is such an individualized process.
There you go. So there's no right or wrong. It's about what's best for you. So hold on. So Diane, tell us, what do you think have you discovered with your clients, not with you, but with your clients, have you heard or seen a best or a better time for them to downsize?
I realized studying for this that the only time I use the term downsize is if I'm with a group of people that use that term. I don't ever use that word. I didn't think of it as downsizing, either move. And I describe it as an opportunity to restyle, redesign your life. It's a wonderful opportunity. And that's why it comes multiple times in your life. And you can take that opportunity and redesign. It just seems better to me. I'm gaining something. I gained something every time I downsized. Every time I redesigned my life, I gained far more than I gave away. So I think any time's okay. It depends on your need.
And so yes, hold on. I'm going to add one to this thing to this. When my mother downsized the second time, she explained to me, she pulled me aside and we had a meeting. And the meeting was, Shannon, there's a window of opportunity that I get to control this redesign in my life. Or if I miss the window and it closes, then I'm afraid that you're going to have to take care of that for me. So I'm doing this while the window is still open, and I can throw everything through the window myself and not break the window. That was her analogy. And it really made a lot of sense to me. And I thought, well, that's true, because all of her windows were open and she threw everything out the window and redesigned herself. So that's about control.
Well, and what a gift to you, right? What a gift to you.
Absolutely.
Can I contrast that with one real quick? So the whole control thing is there are 2 psychological factors here at play that you'll hear probably interwoven through this whole conversation. And I'm going to ask a quick question. Is my mic up enough for you guys?
Can it be here?
Okay. So my Aunt Sylvia, and I've told this story a few times, so some of you have been around, but not everybody's heard this. She was 92. She was still active. She'd been widowed for several years, driving, had activities, events, very involved. She developed neuropathy in her feet and didn't really tell anybody that. She'd fallen a few times, but she was still getting around and driving. And my uncle let her. She had no children. My uncle and my dad were her primary caregivers. She went to visit a friend one day in a community that had a guard shack with a code, a keypad that you had to enter to go through. She stopped at the guard shack. While she was entering the code, we don't know exactly, she says her foot got stuck on the accelerator. Her foot took the accelerator all the way down. She charged through the guard shack, hit 2 houses before she finally stopped after hitting and destroying somebody's garage. She went to the hospital. Nothing was broken. Airbags deployed. She was okay. Went through a little bit of rehab, moved to Spanish Cove into independent living because my Uncle Don said no more. And she said, I have money and insurance and I can buy a car if I want to. And he said, you're right, but if you do that, I'm out. I am no longer going to help you. So she quit driving, moved to Spanish Cove. I went to visit her one day. This is when I was living out of town. She had lived there about 6 months. Beautiful apartment, great. I said, how are you doing? And she said, well, if living in prison is your idea of life, then this is great. Independent living community.
Correct.
Had the money to do anything she wanted to do. I said, what do you mean prison? She said, well, I can't go anywhere, can't do anything, which was not true. But because she was forced to move in her mind, she lived a terrible end of life. She had a few really rough years. And unlike Diane, she dug her heels in and said, you aren't going to tell me what to do, and I'm going to do what I want. And eventually, she could have killed somebody that day. She could have killed a woman in a stroller with a dog, and it never crossed her mind.
There were 2 ladies in the nursing home that impacted my life more than anybody. Moselle and Maggie. Maggie and Moselle were sisters. One day, through the nursing home door, came these 2 little old ladies from Ada, Oklahoma, farm wives. These were tough women with their suitcases in their hand, and they announced they have come for a room. They had sold their property. They gave it to their children. They got rid of it. They made a good choice. Health-wise, they came to where they needed to come. They walked through proudly with their suitcase, and they lived there several years. And they were delightful. They ran the nursing home. They were absolutely delightful. Then I had other clients who would not make that choice, and DHS came to their home. And the judge said, you're out, you're going to the nursing home. They drugged them literally into the nursing home. I had way more clients like that.
And took away their legal rights, basically.
Correct.
Yeah.
You have no civil rights at all. And I can tell you 100%, and I had a large number of those clients. No matter what I did and no matter what the nursing home staff, and they worked hard at it, those patients of mine never recovered emotionally. And
So they never recovered emotionally from their lack of choice.
That's correct. From a judge ordering you into a nursing home and all of your life ripped away from you. They do. I had no magic wand, and I tried. There's no fixing it. And then I remembered Moselle and Maggie, and they had a ball. They redesigned their last phase of their life, and they were thriving in it. They were my role model.
There's no amount of counseling that can help somebody that's in that state of mind. You talked about that one lady.
Right.
None.
So ladies, you're talking, so we're jumping ahead. This is why. This is my favorite part, is when we just kind of throw the questions out the window and we just skip around. So we're jumping ahead, and the question then becomes, so you guys have begun to talk about the difference with downsizing, redesigning our life. Actually, I'm going to tell you, I'm pretty sure Becky is somewhere in the back and she's written down redesign life, and our marketing is not going to say downsizing anymore. It'll say redesign your life, because I like it better. It sounds better, doesn't it? We can start the trend right here.
Restyle. I like the restyle. So,
Yeah. This is marketing expert 1 and marketing expert 2 back there. So yes, they'll take that and run with it. So, but what you guys are talking about is, we talked about the best time, right? When is the best time? Well, there's not a best time. We're all different. But often people will say, I'm not downsizing because I'm not ready yet. or I'm not going to downsize until I can no longer manage what I have in front of me. So what do you see? So Catherine, I'm going to start with you because this way we don't have to follow either of the personalities on the outer side here. So, if you've got this client who is now telling you that I need to move, what does it look different from a client that says I need to move to a client who is planning and doing it, wanting to move? What does the difference look like in your experience?
Well, okay, let me tell you two client stories of two very different situations. So one of the first clients that I had the pleasure of helping restyle her life, I love that. She was ready. Her husband had passed away. She was living by herself. She had made the decision herself to move to a senior living community. Now, she still told me, I'm not happy about this process, but it's what's best for me and it's where I need to be. And she recognized that her declining health and her declining physical mobility was isolating her. Okay. And so she was very well aware that moving into a community where she would be surrounded by people was going to be very positive for her. She was a rock star at downsizing. We were just there to help her move things around. We were there to help her.
You were the muscle.
We were the muscle in that situation. And several years later, I worked with another client. He was not super happy about downsizing. His children said, it's time. You've got to move out of the family home. You need to be in a smaller space. And he wasn't super happy about it. And I remember he had a coffee table. And this coffee table became rather contentious in the process. And truthfully, I don't think it was really about the coffee table. We talk about feeling a lack of control in this process. And I think he was digging in his heels about the coffee table. And so instead of just flat out saying, you can't take the coffee table, you're moving into 700 square feet. It is too big. It's going to be a tripping hazard. It just doesn't make sense. I sat down with this client. We pulled up the floor plan for the unit that he was moving into. We pulled out the measuring tape and we sat there for an hour and we planned out his space. I never once told him he could or couldn't take the coffee table. But once we sat there and looked at how it was going to fit within his new home and how much space it was going to take up, he got to take control of that decision and say, you know what? Let's find a smaller coffee table. And I was really proud of how we were able to turn that around for him because it wasn't as fun of a process for him.
Okay. So Diane, tell us about clients. So we've known Madge, what were the two clients? Moselle and Meg. I love the name Moselle. I like that. Okay, so what clients have you seen what were their comments and what would their story be if they didn't get to pick, that it was told to them that they had to move or they passed the window?
It's devastating.
No.
It's devastating. I'll tell you, if you got any plan in life, you need to plan your last phase of life. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. I can't tell you how devastating it is to people when they have that taken away from them. They don't get over it. They really don't. And so I'm a big advocate of this. The other thing that's so important now that very seldom is pointed out to anybody, I'm in a room of women. Primarily there's women in this group. So I know when I say you have organized and planned your life considering everybody around you, I'm talking to every woman in this room. You are you are trained, it's in your DNA to think about everybody in your move. In the 80s, I still had children to think about. I had to think about, I got a kid in college, I got a kid at her dad's that really should come back to live with her mother, and I had other people to think of. This last downsize, this last redesign, it dawned on me. I'm it. I don't have to think about anybody. They're off and running. They got their own life. They're rolling. It's my redesign, and that's what I did. Where do I want to live? What do I want to do? And I'll tell you, ladies, it'll be a little bit of a shock to you because you're not used to, at this age, putting yourself first, absolutely, over your children, your husband, your neighbors. You're not used to it, and you're real skilled at putting everybody and all the dogs ahead of you.
Okay, very good. Nikki, what do you, see, I made you follow her this.
I feel a little bit bad because Diane says she thought about everybody else. I've never thought about anybody else. I just did whatever the heck I wanted to. And
See, that's not true. It's not.
I feel like that's true, but maybe not. I need some therapy around that. Yes.
I'll help coach you later.
Okay, you do that. I think all of those things considered, I wrote down to myself, what Catherine said. We don't like to be told what to do. None of us. Some of us more than others. Men more than women. Women in the, I'm going to use a demographic, say 50 and older, current day 50 and older, have been taught that it's okay to maybe do what other people want you to do, but men generally, you're not going to tell me what to do, and if I don't want to move, I'm damn well not moving, and that's okay. Here's the challenge I wrote down was spouses. If you're married, it's different than when you're single. Because whether you're widowed or single or never married, whatever it is, divorced, if you're married and your spouse does not want to move, or they want to move and you don't want to move, you have a problem. Because you've got to compromise somewhere. And people typically compromise in the position of staying put. I have had a few clients that one spouse convinced the other spouse to go ahead and make a move. One in particular, I think of, moved to Spanish Cove years ago, remodeled the whole apartment. It was beautiful when they got it done, and we were all excited. They moved in, and about a month later, I heard from the marketing rep, and she said they moved out. As like in the middle of the night, or what happened, She goes, no. She said they just said, you know what, this is not for them, and they moved out, and then they went out and rented a house. And I said, well, he won, because she was the one that wanted to downsize and he didn't, and he tried it. And then basically I found out later, he just said, I don't want to live in an apartment.
Right.
So he moved out. They moved out together. But spouses is a big thing.
Because they have different needs at different points. Retirement looks different for men and women.
Well, women do all the work and men don't.
Well, no, that's not quite fair. I'll stick up for the guys. But it looks different. Retirement may look different. Somebody before we started today said, well, are you going to have a full house today? I said, oh, yeah, we'll have a full house. They go, well, now it's a pretty good day for golf. Do you think people will still show up? Because it's a good day to go play golf. I said, no, it'll be full. No, we may have a few less guys, but we'll still have a full house. So there is a difference. Retirement looks different for different.
And I say that in jest, obviously, but the reality is, in many cases, the reason women want to downsize into something smaller, even if it's not a retirement community, is because the interior of the home has generally been the domain of the woman. The exterior of the home has generally been the domain of the man. Not always, but generally. And what happens is, as real estate agents, we get this a lot. Hey, Nikki, can you recommend somebody to trim the shrubs, handle cleaning out the gutters, doing the yard, making sure the exterior maintenance is handled, because it's no longer, number one, either physically safe or manageable, or it just needs to get done, so they hire it done. But what most people we don't hardly ever have a woman call us and say, I need a housekeeper, or I need a cook, or I need somebody to change my linens and vacuum and clean and do the interior. Never do we hear that. So what happens is we hire out the stuff that the husband would generally do, and the woman is still working herself to death. Now, if a woman has knee surgery, hip surgery, some sort of health issue, all of a sudden the husband goes, this isn't as easy as I thought it was. And they start to think about how much work it is to manage that household. And some men then say, okay, maybe now we should downsize. Well, by the time that has happened, she is now physically in a position to where it's difficult and needs some help. And it's going to, by the way, cost you money to get help. I'm just going to tell you right now, I love Catherine. She's got job security because people wait until they need to move before they move. And it costs money to hire somebody to help. So if you don't want to pay somebody and you don't have a lot of, family or friends that are able and willing to help you with this process, you should probably do it before you have a health event of any kind, right?
Before you need to.
Before you need
it's a
it.
must have,
Yeah.
right?
But spouses, I just want to wrap that up with a little bow. The whole spouse thing, I have agents all around the country. And even Shannon, one day, we were talking about who is your ideal client. If you could have, 100 clients that look just like this one, which one would it be? And I said, I love couples.
Oh, no.
And because I did my dissertation on couples and I understand couple dynamics and I love counseling people through stuff, I love counseling couples through this decision-making process. Shannon's like, ugh. They're hard.
They're hard.
They're hard.
They're fun, but they're harder. Why are they harder, Nikki?
We don't have time. That's a whole nother seminar.
Okay, so why are they harder, Diane? Diane, why are they harder?
I have found that when working with a couple, working on compromise was a waste of their money and their time. Compromise ended up being one person sucked it up and the other one got their way. On downsizing, not on marital relationships, you got to compromise on those. When it comes to restyling where you're going to live the last phase of your life, no, there's no compromising. So after I decided I was wasting their time and their money, I took a different approach. And if I can help a couple, one of them has to make their mind up. One of them. Most often, it's men who don't want to sell and move. Most often. If their wife decides, that's it, we're selling and moving, I can tell you 100% of the time the men decided to suck it up and move. 100% of the time. So one has to decide, period. And if not, you're probably going to stay where you're at.
You must be better at it than I am. But you are tough, yeah.
Tough.
Because I would say definitely we have women right now sitting in their homes, exhausted,
That's
overwhelmed.
correct.
They're going to end up dying before their spouse.
That's correct.
Because they can't manage all of it and they're trying really hard.
Correct.
And they're not. Here's my biggest issue. They don't tell their husband.
Correct. I was going to say, that's the piece you're missing from hers.
Yeah.
The part we're missing, because we
were realtors, not counselors.
Counselors. I can't help that one because I'm afraid I might lead someone to talk to a divorce attorney, and that's not my job. So it is not my job.
Let me tell that story. No, there was a real client, and this lady, I met with her and her husband, and he would not come to the dining room table. He would not. He sat in the other room. He would not participate in the conversation. And I was invited. I was asked to come and meet with him.
Calling, knocking
No.
on doors like roofers now.
And I thought, okay, well, that's odd. He won't come. I thought, that's very telling. We're probably not moving. Well, so we had this long conversation. And in this dining room, I don't think he could hear us. I don't think his hearing was that great, but he could see us in eye shot. And she just wept. She wept. And I said, I don't know how to help you. I can refer you to a counselor. I said, but I am not the person to counsel you through this. This is no longer my role. And so she walked me to the door. And as we got to the door and we were at the outside of the screen door, she said, I don't know what to do. And I said, you do have a choice that you could make. And I paused and she goes, well, I can't get divorced.
I've never had a couple divorce.
I said,
Number one.
I said I wasn't recommending divorce, but I did say you could move. You could decide to go ahead and move and tell him he's on his own. You could do that. She goes, I don't think I could do that. And I'm thinking, well, you should. But you know, she stayed in that home miserable for 2 more years before he died. And then he died, and within that next month, she had made a decision and she moved to a community where she could manage. And by the way, they didn't just have that house, they had a lake house, and he basically, he left her with such a mess. And my heart hurt for her because she tried so hard. And she was a good wife. She took good care of him. Yeah.
And she is thriving now. I still speak with her. She's a lovely lady. It's not a fire drill. They're just changing classes.
Sorry about that.
We're doing fine. Actually, it's not a bad cue, and I'm going to tell you why. Because that is my reminder that it's 11 o'clock, and we're going to sum up this. So I've got one last question I'm going to ask each one of the group, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. Okay? So go back through your notes as we're asking this last question. And if you have any questions, we're going to have mic runners that are going through, and they're going to be there for you to ask your questions. And that way these ladies can answer any additional questions you have. So guys, last question I have for you before we go to the Q&A is, what advice or words of wisdom would you have for someone who is, we'll say, on the fence about redesigning their life, restyling their life? We are starting a trend right here in Northwest Oklahoma City is what I'm telling you. And I think the last time my mom was on the panel, we had another word, and I can't remember what it was. I'll think about it.
I think we got rid of retirement.
We did. We got rid of the word retirement last time. Yeah. And but it came back, so you never know what comes back. So Catherine, what words of wisdom or advice would you give someone who was on the fence about downsizing?
You can do hard things. I'm not saying it's easy, but I bet every person in this room could tell me a life story about some challenge they've had, some hard thing they have done in life. And that was probably harder than downsizing. So you can do it. To this day, every client that we have worked with has very successfully downsized. And I would say in the end, most of them grow to enjoy the process working with us, because in that coaching process, we lead them through in a much easier way than probably the way they were approaching the process. We get to work with them. We have so much fun. And then in the end, they really start focusing on the positives, getting to be closer to grandchildren and being present for all of the things that are going on in that grandchild's life, not feeling so isolated in the home by themselves, more time around people and caring less for the home. Oh my gosh, some of our clients move into some of the most beautiful spaces. I'm kind of jealous of a few of the spaces we've gotten to move our clients into after they have restyled their life. So
I love that.
You can do it.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, Diane.
If I had $1 for every time a client said to me, "I'm afraid," I could probably join the elite rich in America. And I always had the same response. And it was the wisdom that somebody told me when I was very young. And that was, feel the fear and do it anyway. That's what I tell my clients. Yes, you're going to be afraid. Yes, you're going to be anxious. Yes, you don't know. Feel that and then follow your decision. Do it anyway. Another $1.
Okay, there you go. Okay, and so, okay, I'll come back to that one. I love that one. Both are very smart, very, very wise. Okay, now you have the tough one to follow, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough.
Well, I had two, so I'm going to pick one. I think that and I'm going to put myself in this bucket. This isn't about us pointing fingers. This is about we, because we're all human.
Yeah.
We all experience the human condition, right? And here's the issue. We have got to know that everyone downsizes, everyone. And when I did this talk a year or two ago, the very first slide that I put up on the screen was a coffin. And I put on the coffin on the slide, everyone downsizes. And some of my colleagues thought that was a little blunt.
Well, if you're not looking for blunt
Right.
faces, so not.
That's why we call this the Truth Series. And because Dr. Ladd, like Diane, I had a very wise person tell me something. This was fairly recent. Dr. Ladd moved from a independent living apartment, he and his wife, into assisted, and then later we moved him into long-term care. And when he moved from assisted into long-term care, he was an academic, and he was very contemplative, and he said, "My world just keeps getting smaller and smaller." And then when we watched my Uncle Donnie pass in his own home, he didn't move. He went from a 3-bedroom, 2-car, 2-bath house to the living room, the bathroom, and the bedroom, to the bedroom and bathroom, to the bed, to the coffin. And I don't mean to be morbid, but I think if we don't think about what that trajectory looks like for us, we are going to end up we're in denial, and we're going to end up in a crisis at some point. That doesn't mean you have to do it today, but Chris and I downsized into a 2-bedroom townhome when we moved back to Oklahoma. We love it. It's a 2-story, and we know that it's not our forever home. We're going to need a flat, right? And we're looking at that sooner than later. But here's the thing. The advice I would give is this. Get some friends around you or a family member that you trust, because you won't know when the right time is. But they will. And that trusted person is the person that needs to look you in the eye and say, "Remember when we talked about the right time and you told me to tell you when it was the right time? Well, I'm telling you right now."
If you don't choose yourself.
And that's right. If you haven't done it in advance, even then, Shannon, I think it's, Marilyn Olson is really great about saying, when it's time to let go of the keys, my daughter knows to tell me, and I'm going to listen. And that's the key.
Gives up the keys first.
Or unless she gives up the keys first. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so you're either in charge or you're abdicating that to somebody else, and you better abdicate it to somebody you trust, or you're going to get the court system, just like Diane's talking about her client.
I have a little different take on that. I actually believe everybody has that moment where they know. I believe everybody has that moment, and some people squelch it. They squelch it.
So
100% agree.
So the only last bit, so I'm loving each one of yours. So I'm going to add to what I've heard. What I'm taking away as the moderator, I always learn more as the moderator as I've been than when I sit in the audience even. Guys, I hear that you can be scared and do it anyway. It's overwhelmed, you get a choice, but you have to work through it. Fear is there, accept it, acknowledge it, and go forward. Nikki's talking about taking that opportunity and listening and involving others and knowing when that window is. All of the common theme amongst that I'm hearing is do something. Step forward. So if you do nothing today, but think about the psychology of deciding to step forward and take a step forward, you have won. You have done something. That's step one. Okay, so now we're ready to open it to Q&A. So we're going to borrow a few of your microphones. Corey is going to take one of them, and JD's going to take the other one. Okay. Okay, so who has a question for the group? Just raise your hand and these guys will come right to you. Okay, so we have a question here. Now, guys, I know you're not bashful, so make sure you ask your questions. This is your opportunity to be able to ask these ladies what you're thinking. Okay.
I want to ask Diane how you coached couples where one wanted to stay in the home and one was ready to move.
The first thing I do is I don't go down the road of compromise with them. They might come in talking about that, and I let everybody talk about it and give me their ideas on compromise, and they aren't ideas on compromise. They're ideas on who gets to be the boss. And I let them work through all that and then get mad at their spouse because they realize he's only saying he wants to be the boss. Once they work through all that, then I start talking about, with both of them, What's your desire? What do you want? I start working with them together as if they're two individual people, which they are two individual people. So that's what I do. And every time somebody rises to the top to be the one to be the decision maker in the group, and absolutely 100% of the time, I've not provoked a divorce, and everybody moved forward happily.
Okay, good question. Okay, what other questions? Oh, guys, I can't imagine we don't have questions. Okay.
Got it right here. There. I want to add to the couples thing, just for the benefit of those sitting in the room who are saying, I want to move, but my wife won't move. It does go the other way, just so you know. It's not unilateral men only. It can definitely be the other way around. It's just more rare. Either way, it's a control issue, right? And by the way, it's also usually, I had a couple, let me just say this, I had a couple, they used to come to our seminars regularly. They worked through this downsizing process mentally first and then physically. And when I sat with them and asked them, of course, all my research was on why people were downsizing, which is interesting. I said, why? Why are you doing this? Because they had already decided. And Stan's wisdom, he said, you know what? He said, I'm a Christian man. And he said, it is my responsibility. Now, this was his belief system. It doesn't have to be yours. But I'm a Christian man. It's my responsibility as the head of the household to take care of my wife. And she needs more help than I can give her in this home. It has become too difficult for her. He said he still worked. He was not retired yet. He said, I'm still working. I don't want to move. I don't want to leave my home, but I love my wife, and we're going to move because she needs it. And that moment, I just was like, I was so grateful because I was used to fighting the battle, right? I was used to having to go through the motions of this decision. And when he said that, it just hit me. It was like he loved her so much that he was willing to do the hard thing for him because it was right for them as a couple. And he said, and when I'm gone, this was the last thing he said, when I'm gone, I want her to be surrounded by people that can help her if I can't do it. Ugh, that was it for me. I was like, okay, I want my marriage to be that way, right? And I feel like I have that marriage with my husband, and it won't be getting him out of a house, it'll be getting him off the boat. We'll be getting him off a boat into something more manageable.
Okay, we've got a question here.
Okay, I'm a social worker by training, so by nature, I try to help people get the best. I live in a 55-plus neighborhood that is very secure, very nice, but I know several people that live in that neighborhood that is very worrisome. They should not be by themselves. How can you be of help without being a busybody when you have somebody that you're worried for their safety, but you're not that trusted person?
So I'm going to repeat the question in case because you guys hear. She lives in a 55 and older neighborhood, and she's a social worker by training, and so she's automatically kind of evaluating how to help people. And there are a lot of people in that community that probably need some help. And how do you do that without being seen as a busybody? And also because you want to when you don't really have the authority. You're not the trusted confidant of those people. We live in a condo complex, and we have the same problem. It's not a 55 and older community, but it might as well be. We are the young ones in the group.
You got younger ones.
We do now. Reagan bought a house there. She's in her 20s. I love it.
Two of them. We had two.
So what we found is we have a couple of people in the neighborhood with dementia. We have one gentleman who has neuropathy, ran through the brick fence recently. And part of it has to do with finances. I'm going to just say finances are an issue. You need to know that. So people move into, we've seen this in real estate for years. They move into a smaller house, condo, patio home, garden home, something of that variety, because the cost of independent living and assisted living is beyond their means. That's the best they could do. That's one thing. And so to say, okay, why don't you downsize into a retirement community where you can get some help? They may not be able to financially, okay? Now, if they're renting especially. Now, if they own their home, there's a higher likelihood they could, but not always. So our neighborhood, here's how we handle it. Our association has I'm going to call her a busybody. She's lived there forever, but she's a loving, caring, very, very amazing busybody. Does that make sense? She knows everybody, she knows everything, but she's loving, not intrusive. And what happens is when that happens is she looks and says, do I know their children? Do they have children? And if so, do I know them? And she will call them and say, I noticed there's something going on with your mom or dad, and it would be great if you would check in on them and let me know what we can do to help, right? That's not our responsibility as a neighborhood because it's not even, it's just a neighborhood. But as a loving neighbor, that happens. And Chris is on the board. He does a lot of well checks on people. And I think I would say you would have to get your board of your homeowners association on board with you to create some sort of a care community with, but there's a thing in the U.S. called a naturally occurring retirement community. If you haven't heard of that, NORC for short. Naturally occurring retirement community. And what happens is people age in the place that they're living, and people learn to adapt and create services. So it operates a lot like a retirement community, even though it's not a retirement community. But you have to get people on board to do that. And by the way, if someone is at risk, you think they're at risk, they shouldn't be driving and they are, or they're living in a situation that's not safe or healthy for them, then you can report them to Adult Protective Services. That's kind of a last resort, obviously. And if it's not crisis-oriented or urgent, don't expect an immediate response. But if somebody is completely unsafe, let's say they're wandering or something like that, you could get the state involved if they are not willing to let you help.
And it kind of leads to another question. Actually, you read my mind about involving the community. So we talked about the noise. So there's a lot of noise. Sometimes noise can be good and sometimes noise can be bad. So that's where you're wanting to, I would think, turn that noise into a positive noise. So kind of like the happy busybody, the nice busybody.
How can we help that person?
We help that person and give them resources they may not know. It may be as simple as inviting somebody to the Senior Living Truth Series that they have resources in the back with educational partners that they didn't even know were out there. And it may be that you learn something here and share it with 3 neighbors, so you're not making one neighbor feel picked on. So those are other alternatives.
And by the way, be a busybody. I'm sorry, we need more busybodies who care. I'm just saying, there's something to be said for that, and I don't mean to be intrusive in people's lives, but guys, if we don't step up and care about our neighbors, we're going to have problems, and I think that's really important. So thank you for doing that.
Okay, we've got a question over here.
Body. It's not a question, but a comment. I was one of those busybodies. I had a neighbor across the street, and I thought she needed to go somewhere. And I had a friend of mine that dealt with DHS a lot, and he said, you need to rethink that. She may be better off with your help than where they would send her.
So what you're saying, even though you weren't a busybody, you were helpful, but giving her resources may be better than going directly to calling, okay, at my house, I say it's calling the puppy hotline when I leave my dog too long at home, and it's instead of calling the Child Protective Services or the doggy hotline, you would call Adult Protective Services, but maybe finding other resources to help them stay and age in place safely where they're at would be just as useful.
And guys, everybody has freedom of choice. I mean, let's be honest. If these people are cognitively aware, they're cognitively intact, people can live whatever life they want to. We may not agree with it. It's when their decision-making begins to impact others that it's a problem. So if they're driving and it's unsafe, that could affect all of us. So that person should be helped and be dealt with. If that person just wants to live their life in their own home and not downsize, and it's miserable and you can't imagine it, but it's their decision and they're capable of making those decisions, then let them. It's sad for those of us who don't want that for them, but that's their choice.
That's their choice. It's all about choice. Yes.
So, Nikki, you mentioned something about affordability. And so my question is, what about those who cannot afford to go to a community, and they're moving in with a family member, like their daughter? So how does any of your answers or advice change given that dynamic?
Oh, hold on, let her answer. Or let's, I want to hear. So, what would it look like if you moved in with your daughter, Diane?
I don't want to really answer this.
No.
There you go.
No, back in. No, she can answer. It won't hurt her. It won't.
I'm real allergic to cats, so I'd have to kill her cats. And I don't think that'd help our relationship at all. And I got a good one now. I'm no longer mama. And so that's my issue. I think with everybody that moving in with your child, you've got to assess your own problems. I could live with my daughter just fine. I can't live with cats. I won't be able to breathe. So it's an individual thing. You got to assess it.
But it's a conversation. It's a conversation. It's part of that noise that you're talking about.
It's also about boundaries.
Yes.
You have got to have, it's just like if your kids boomerang and move back in, you've got adults now living under the same household. Adults. And if that adult is cognitively impaired, that's different, because now it's an adult with someone who's cognitively impaired, which means you're the adult and they need care. But if they are healthy for the most part and cognitively intact, it is very important that you have house rules. And it may require going to a counselor to establish those so that you're all on the same page. Because I'm going to tell you, it will save if you're married and they're moving in, you're a mother-in-law or a father-in-law, that kind of thing. That's different too, the dynamics, if you have children in the home. Not all families have good family dynamics. Have y'all heard? It's not all families get along.
It varies. Okay,
Yeah.
so Catherine, I want you to address this a little bit. Do you see people, your clients, that are moving family members in, and is it helpful to be organized? And Nikki talked about boundaries, but some physical boundaries that people have their own space, and how do you help them organize and walk through that discussion?
I think that's incredibly important, that particularly for the parent that is moving in with the child, and we see this whether it's moving in with a family member or it's just moving to a space that is not yours, that is not that family home that you've lived in for decades, that space can feel like yours. So I think there's some give on the behalf of the child, that we allow mom or dad or mom and dad to create a space that is theirs, while at the same time we've got to respect that, this is your child's home. And so we need to set some boundaries. Over the years, we've seen some really neat living situations that families have gone into that allows the families to coexist within units or joint units, but still gives them their separate spaces.
Okay,
There's some neat things out there.
Okay.
That compromise really needs to be the focus. It is a compromise situation, and that takes work sometimes.
Well, we noticed, though, that she got to compromise when it came down to living with her daughter. Did we hear that? We heard that. She knows she's on tape, and that somewhere we might go back to the tape later on. Yeah, just that piece for her. I just thought I'd throw that out there. Well, guys, so did we learn something today? Okay. Guys, I want to thank this group. They did an amazing job.